Let me ask you something straight. When was the last time you heard global analysts stop and say, "Hold on, Pakistan's Air Force deserves a closer look"? It doesn't happen often, and when it does, there's a reason. Behind the headlines, behind the stereotypes, lies a story of transformation, of resilience, and of a force that has quietly rewritten the rules of air power in South Asia. This isn't just about jets or bombs, it's about strategy, adaptability, and lessons that even the biggest militaries in the world are now studying. When global analysts look at Pakistan's Air Force today, they are not just seeing a regional fighting arm that exists only to counter threats from across its borders. They are witnessing an institution that has evolved beyond the narrow frame it was once boxed into. For decades, discussions around Pakistan's defense were painted with a predictable brush, a small state in a volatile neighborhood trying to keep pace with a larger rival. That narrative no longer holds. The Pakistan Air Force has stepped outside that conventional storyline through sheer adaptability, innovation, and a long-term vision that many underestimated. This transformation is not a cosmetic shift, it is structural. It represents how a nation with limited resources can still carve out a formidable presence in the global defense conversation. Analysts studying military evolution often highlight how smaller powers either fade into irrelevance or become entirely dependent on the larger blocs around them. But Pakistan's Air Force has chosen a third path. It has crafted an identity that is self-reliant in doctrine, agile in modernization, and confident in execution. This shift is significant because it shows how a force once dismissed as reactive has become one that is now studied for its proactive strategies. It is not just about new jets or flashy hardware. It is about institutional learning, how to adapt tactics after conflicts, how to innovate with partners while protecting sovereignty, and how to create an operational philosophy that acknowledges both weakness and strength in equal measure. The evolution of the PAF matters because it challenges traditional assumptions in military studies. Bigger is not always better. Wealth alone does not define capability. The story of Pakistan's Air Force is, in many ways, the story of how resilience, clever partnerships, and disciplined modernization can write a completely new chapter in global air power. It is why defense experts in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and New Delhi have had to pay attention, because ignoring it now means failing to understand how 21st century air forces are redefining themselves under pressure. When observers talk about the Pakistan Air Force today, one of the most striking features they point to is its ability to leverage indigenous and collaborative defense projects to break away from dependency on traditional suppliers. For a country facing restrictions, sanctions, and often politicized access to Western defense markets, this shift was not optional but a matter of survival, and the way Pakistan executed it has become a case study in strategic improvisation. The most visible example is the JF-17 Thunder program, co-developed with China, which was not only a technical achievement but also a political signal to the world that Pakistan would no longer be defined by the limits imposed on it. This fighter jet has moved beyond being a symbolic project. It is now an operational backbone of the air fleet, integrating modern avionics, precision weaponry, and adaptable design that allows continuous upgrades without begging for approval from foreign governments. What makes analysts pay attention is not just the aircraft itself, but the model it represents, a mid-tier power using collaboration to produce a weapons system that is combat-tested, cost-effective, and export-capable. The global defense market has taken note because countries with limited defense budgets now look at Pakistan's approach as a blueprint for achieving autonomy without sinking billions into untested mega-projects. Beyond fighter jets, the Air Force has invested in locally engineered drones, munitions, and electronic warfare systems, developing a layered ecosystem of defense technology that blends foreign partnerships with domestic ingenuity. This dual approach keeps Pakistan flexible. It can integrate Chinese, Turkish, or even Western components into a structure that it largely controls, minimizing vulnerability to supply cutoffs. What unsettles traditional defense analysts is the speed with which Pakistan has adapted to these shifts. Where larger nations often take decades to bring a project from design to deployment, Pakistan has been forced to move faster. Relying on innovation born out of necessity, it has created a culture where engineers, pilots, and strategists work in tandem to solve problems not in theory, but in the field, producing systems that reflect operational realities rather than abstract designs on paper. This is why the PAF is studied not just for its platforms, but for its process, a process that demonstrates how agility and collaboration can create sustainable defense independence even under economic and geopolitical constraints. One of the central reasons Pakistan's Air Force is attracting the attention of global analysts is its deliberate shift toward precision warfare and electronic superiority, a domain that is increasingly shaping the outcome of modern conflicts. In an age where brute force alone is no longer decisive, the ability to see without being seen, to strike with accuracy rather than volume, and to disable enemy systems without direct confrontation has become the gold standard. Pakistan understood this reality earlier than many gave it credit for, and its investments in electronic warfare, surveillance, and precision-guided weaponry have altered the balance of expectations in South Asia. The world witnessed a glimpse of this in 2019, when the PAF's ability to carry out precision strikes while avoiding escalation sent shockwaves through defense circles. That episode demonstrated that Pakistan had mastered not just the art of flying combat jets, but the deeper science of controlling the electromagnetic spectrum, disrupting communication, and denying the enemy an information advantage. Modern analysts study the way the PAF integrates drones into its operational doctrine, not just as reconnaissance tools, but as strike platforms capable of delivering smart munitions with surgical accuracy. These technologies are being developed alongside electronic jamming systems that can blind adversaries' radars or confuse their targeting, essentially reducing the effectiveness of expensive enemy platforms in real time. This focus on electronic superiority is not accidental. It is a necessity born of asymmetry. Facing a larger adversary with greater numbers, Pakistan cannot afford attrition warfare. It has to rely on finesse, timing, and disruption. By developing indigenous systems and partnering with nations like Turkey and China, the PAF has created a toolkit that extends far beyond traditional dogfighting. Analysts now look at how the Air Force combines airborne early warning systems, precision-guided munitions, and electronic jammers to create a layered operational environment where even technologically superior opponents face uncertainty. This is why the PAF is studied not as a conventional force, but as a case of how asymmetric precision and electronic dominance can change the strategic equation in a conflict zone. What sets Pakistan's Air Force apart in the eyes of global analysts is that its doctrines and capabilities are not confined to theoretical war games or staged exercises. They have been tested in high-pressure, real-world combat engagements. Unlike many air forces that boast of advanced platforms but lack practical battlefield experience, the PAF has been forced by geography and politics to prove its worth in moments of real conflict. The most prominent example came in February 2019, during the standoff with India, when the PAF executed a retaliatory strike in a manner that stunned observers across the world. It was not just that Pakistani jets penetrated contested airspace, it was how they managed to deliver their payloads with precision while deliberately avoiding civilian casualties and large-scale escalation. The operation was surgical, signaling both capability and restraint, a combination that defense analysts found deeply instructive. That incident forced many to reassess assumptions about South Asian air power dynamics and revealed that the PAF was not only prepared for combat, but also adept at controlling the narrative of escalation. something larger militaries often struggle with. Beyond this, the PAIF's combat experience extends to counter-terrorism operations within Pakistan's borders, where it has repeatedly demonstrated its ability to adapt fast-jet warfare to unconventional threats. Striking militant hideouts in mountainous terrain, integrating drones for reconnaissance, and coordinating with ground forces have given it a depth of operational knowledge that few air forces in the developing world can match. Analysts find this important because it shows a force that has learned to fight in diverse environments, from high-altitude dogfights to asymmetric campaigns against non-state actors. Each of these experiences feeds back into training, doctrine, and technological development, creating a feedback loop that makes the PAF sharper with each passing decade. What makes these lessons globally relevant is that the future of warfare is expected to be hybrid, combining state-on-state standoffs with counterinsurgency and asymmetric battles, and Pakistan's Air Force has already lived through both. This reality ensures that when analysts examine the PAF, they are not looking at a theoretical capability, but at a battle-tested institution whose strategies carry the weight of actual experience. In the complex security architecture of South Asia, the Pakistan Air Force occupies a role far larger than its numerical size might suggest, serving as a critical balancing factor in a region where instability can escalate with alarming speed. The presence of nuclear weapons on both sides of the India-Pakistan divide makes the stakes immeasurably higher, and it is within this fragile environment that the PAF operates as both a shield and a signal. Its existence is not simply about defense, but about deterrence, about maintaining a balance that prevents one side from assuming overwhelming superiority. Analysts emphasize this balancing role because it demonstrates how air power, when strategically managed, can stabilize volatile environments without leading to uncontrolled escalation. Every time the PAF modernizes its fleet or demonstrates operational readiness, it sends a calculated message across the border. Aggression will not go unanswered, and any assumption of quick dominance would be misplaced. This dynamic does not just affect South Asia, but ripples outward to the global stage, since any conflict in this region could have worldwide economic and security consequences. The Air Force's ability to carry out precision strikes, enforce its airspace, and integrate electronic warfare systems adds layers of deterrence that keep adversaries cautious. Its role in balancing is not only against India, however, but also within the wider web of alliances, where Pakistan's relationships with China, Turkey, and even occasional cooperation with Western states create a multipolar defense equation. This forces global analysts to study how the PAF acts as a hinge between competing powers, borrowing technology, and training from multiple partners, yet maintaining independence in how it deploys them. Within Pakistan's own security philosophy, the Air Force has become the rapid response tool, able to project strength faster than ground forces and to communicate deterrence more credibly than rhetoric alone. The importance of this role becomes even clearer when viewed against the backdrop of South Asia's population density and urban vulnerability, where conventional ground wars would be catastrophic and unsustainable. In such a setting, the balance maintained by the PAF's capabilities is not merely military, it is existential, shaping the very possibility of peace or war in the region and forcing the world to recognize its weight in the strategic equation. The global relevance of Pakistan's Air Force lies in how it has come to represent a new model of military thinking in the 21st century, one that emphasizes adaptability, cost-effectiveness, and doctrinal clarity over sheer financial muscle. In an age where some nations pour billions into sprawling programs that take decades to materialize, the PAF has demonstrated how a smaller country with limited resources can still carve out credibility on the world stage. Analysts study Pakistan not because it matches the firepower of the United States, China, or Russia, but because it has crafted an approach that maximizes efficiency while ensuring operational readiness. This model has resonance across the developing world, where many nations are grappling with the challenge of modernizing their forces under severe budgetary constraints. The PAF shows that innovation, partnerships, and combat experience can offset financial limitations. The JF-17 program is one example, but the broader lesson is in how Pakistan integrates new technologies into a functional doctrine without being trapped by prestige-driven projects. The use of drones for reconnaissance and strikes, the investment in electronic warfare, and the emphasis on real-world training exercises all highlight a practical mindset that prioritizes results over appearances. What makes this globally relevant is that future warfare is expected to be asymmetric, hybrid, and technology-driven, rather than dependent solely on large fleets of heavy platforms. Pakistan's Air Force has already demonstrated how to fight in such an environment, whether by countering non-state actors with surgical precision or deterring a conventionally stronger adversary through electronic and psychological dominance. Military strategists in other parts of the world are paying attention because this is a scalable model, one that can be studied and replicated by nations seeking resilience without overextending their budgets. Even for larger powers, the lesson is important. Agility and doctrine often matter more than raw expenditure. The global defense community views the PAF as a laboratory of modern air warfare under constraints, a place where strategies are forged not in theory, but in the crucible of necessity. That reality ensures that discussions about future air power increasingly include Pakistan as a case study, not for its size, but for the way it reflects the shifting demands of modern conflict. So, when we talk about Pakistan's Air Force today, we are not talking about a supporting actor in someone else's play. We are talking about an institution that has evolved beyond survival into influence, one that has built independence through collaboration, sharpened its edge through real combat, and established deterrence in one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. It has shown that strength is not only measured in billions spent, but in clarity of doctrine, efficiency of design, and courage under fire. That is why the world is watching, that is why analysts are paying attention, and that is why the story of Pakistan's Air Force is no longer just a regional narrative. It is part of the global conversation on the future of military power.